Everybody see my screen okay? Is that working? Jack, does that look right? Okay. Um, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled to be here to celebrate the launch of the 2024 Hawaii Quality of Life and Wellbeing Dashboard. We're really grateful in the Office of Wellness and Resilience to be partnering with the University of Hawaii Health Policy Initiative and Jack Burrell and his team. And we're especially grateful to the more than 8,000 people who took the survey, participated in the study, and really were willing to have their voices be heard in sharing this. It also reflects our shared commitment to transparency, trauma-informed care, collaboration, and data-based decision-making. So first and foremost, I want to mahalo all of the folks who took the survey, who shared their stories. I also want to mahalo the visionary leadership of the Trauma-Informed Care Task Force and Senator Donovan Dela Cruz for really pushing this work forward and advocating for this dashboard, as well as our community members, advocates, legislators, and partners. I'm gonna hopefully progress my slides. Okay, yep, great. Our kuleana at the on using healing-centered principles and trauma-informed care, changing the perspective from what's wrong with that person to what happened to them, to their family, and to their community. And the bill that created our office in 2022 outlined several primary responsibilities, including the creation, and you can see it really lightly in yellow at the bottom of it here, of a social determinants of health dashboard outlining and the key tasks and efforts that we have: partnership, collaboration, trauma-informed care policies and programs, training and technical assistance. And so in doing that, we decided to partner with Jack Burrell and his team in the College of Social Sciences of the Health Policy Initiative. We really are so grateful for their leadership in taking such a thoughtful approach to this work, and are excited to see them lead us through the next stages of this dashboard and survey as we move forward. So I will pass it over to Jack Burrell, the Associate Dean of Research in the College of Social Sciences.
Thank you, Dr. Orimoto, and hopefully my internet will be stable because it just kicked me out and then brought me back. So if for some reason I pause, hang tight. Hopefully the university is with us. So thank you. This has been just a incredible collaboration with the Governor's Office of Wellness and Resilience, and frankly with the state in general. So we have been able to really work directly with community members across the state to get such rich data across this survey and develop this dashboard that really is designed to be a resource for the community and for the state, so that we can have a base in this dashboard that could be utilized by community members, nonprofits, legislators, policymakers, everyone that will have an opportunity to see and use the data openly and transparently. And through that, you'll be able to provide testimony, provide refined programs in your community, find out insights into, what are our strengths and where are our liabilities in our neighborhood, and where can we improve. So speaking to the survey, it is the largest survey of adults. It's in the state, and the largest administration of the WellBQ, or the CDC's well-being survey. And through that, we've kind of incorporated the survey across adults and made it available to all adults in the state to take it. Our goals were to evaluate the quality of life across all neighborhoods, regions, and subpopulations. So we worked hard to get representation from community members historically marginalized groups, and reach out to more remote locations across the state to try to get a most representative sample as possible. Our goal was to evaluate the effectiveness of actions, both kind of at I'll say a community level. So what are the kind of resilience factors? What are the concerns in people's neighborhoods so that we can directly address issues that are being identified in neighborhoods, as well as refine policy and programs statewide. Um, so the survey itself is made up of kind of five-ish major areas, which all make up the social determinants of health uh, components of well-being. So that includes educational access and quality, healthcare and quality, neighborhood and built environments, social and community context, and economic stability. And through this, we are also looking to identify challenges and solutions. So we had items on the survey that directly address people's educational opportunities, directly assess people's physical and mental health, directly assess disaster preparedness, which became even more of a prominent and pressing issue after the tragic Maui wildfires. We looked at all aspects of worker well-being. As I mentioned, it's a large survey of individuals' health and well-being in the workplace. We looked at adverse childhood experiences in line with trauma-informed care, looked at family and community supports, and food and housing insecurity, which is you'll see it was a prominent issue in the dashboard, but also one that's been a major issue locally. So we collected data from over 4,700 state workers. We did that through the governor's office was very kind to send out the survey to all the state agencies and give all employees an opportunity to take the survey. We also worked with a contracted survey company to help recruit roughly 2,600 community members to also be able to take the survey. And this was to actually also help to reach a lot of the, let's say, younger populations through a number of technologies, as well as older populations that are hard to reach through other traditional sampling methods. And we also reached directly out to over 1,000 community members who also took the survey. And we did this through trying to make sure that we had identified underrepresented groups in the survey and then reached out to communities that were particularly representative of the people we needed for the survey. So if you look at the demographics, so the data shown here is weighted by demographics for the state to make it as representative as possible. So the data is weighted by education, income, county of residence, gender, and I'll have to pick one more, but to make sure that the data looked very similar. And when we look at the prevalence rates, that we can assume that it is going to be representative of the state generally. And the data we did, the raw data, was actually very close to what we see in the state. It was a little more overrepresented by women. It was also overrepresented by higher income. And those are both traditional issues we have with survey research. So nothing that was, I'll say, surprising given the sample that we received, but to make sure that it was representative of the state, we also used this more statistically driven weighting of the data. So you see that the majority of the sample was from Oahu, and I will pull up the dashboard so we can actually walk through a dashboard and click through it. And I will move your pictures off. Well, you can see the screen okay. If you do not, please chime in. So when you get to I should have started that. To get to the dashboard, you can just go to www.health-study.com. That is our program's web page, and on there you'll see many buttons actually get to the dashboard. And to get to the dashboard, it's actually just a web address. So actually I have it here. So you can click on view the dashboard if you go to health-study.com. That'll bring you to the dashboard. And then once you're at the dashboard, you can navigate through the dashboard as if you were on any web page and you're clicking through. On the left side of the dashboard, you'll see that these are all individual pages, and there's a lot of them. And while it's probably hard to see on your screen because the font's probably small on your end, this is the overall slide, but you can click through it, and as you click through, you'll go to different pages of the dashboard. Slightly smaller. You can also just hit the down button and page through it as if it was a report that you're looking to read. I'll go through just the other kind of, I'll say, mechanics of the dashboard before we actually go to the contents of it. There are filters built into almost all of the pages you can see here. So for example, if you're only interested in looking at data from the city and county of Honolulu, you can click on that. And of course, here you'll see that 100% of the samples coming from Honolulu and everything else is zeroed out. And I'll show you examples of how to use those filters throughout the dashboard. You can also, let's say you're only interested in Native Hawaiians. So we can click on Native Hawaiians and we can see the representation of Native Hawaiians across the different islands. We can then, let's say this, and when you filter for it, all of the pages will be filtered amongst that subpopulation. So once you have those things set, and that's maybe you're only interested in people between the age of 18 and 24 or Native Hawaiians, you can export the report. And if you export the report, you'll get a direct PDF of the entire report, and you can flip through it like a regular report that you could provide someone. It should be legible and something that could be emailed and directly sent to people. You can also download it as a PowerPoint slide, and then you click through it. Basically what happens is you don't see the navigation window on the left, and the rest of it appears as a PowerPoint. So maybe you want to give a presentation to someone on a certain construct or a certain thing that we found. You can just export it as a PowerPoint. Finally, you can also export it as an Excel. So if you want to manipulate the tables or use the tables in a way that and you create your own reports or PowerPoints, you can do that also. So you can actually export all the information there directly into an Excel spreadsheet. So for example, if you click on that, you can see export all, and even a bunch of different ways that you can export it. So you can see just one page or all of the pages. Finally, there's a search button here. So if you're looking for something particular, so let's say money, you can see all of the dashboard components where money is something comes up. So these are all components that have to do with stressors, because that's where actually money is. And you can then flip to any page within the document using the search button. And then as you saw this, as I had it fully, you can also maximize it, which is what I usually do. So it makes it easiest to see the entire contents of the page. So as I mentioned, you can scroll through the pages on the left-hand column to navigate through it. And I will kind of flip through some of the kind of interesting or important findings that might be of interest to you. What you'll see is the dashboard is set in a bunch of kind of general categories. So respondents, these are kind of all of the demographics that summarizes the people who participated in the study. So you can see the average ages and median across the different counties, genders, sex at birth, age, etc. And you can see, oh, I still have the Native Hawaiian on there. You can see the race and ethnicity, and then how that's broken out by counties. Income. Most of these are not particularly interesting in and of itself, except showing the population that's represented by the survey. And then once you get to the actual contents of a lot of the survey indicators, you'll see that they're separated by social stressors. So this is social life satisfaction and support, and then broken down by specific demographics. And that's done so you can make quick comparisons between subpopulations across a number of items. So you see a section on social, see a section on health, see a section on economic, education, and community issues. And then finally, the worker section, which is all the worker well-being. And then on the very bottom, you'll see these analytical models. So I had already clicked. What you'll see is when you get to the very bottom, you see about the survey, see limitations of the data, and then there's on the very bottom here, there's a tab that says analytic models. And here there's a little explanation of some of the analytic models that are included in this dashboard. And of particular, we have a number of models that are what they consider relative importance models. So if you go through here, you can actually see some of the predictive models that we have incorporated into the dashboard. And here, this is, for example, the relative importance analysis of job satisfaction. So here you can see these are all individual predictors of job satisfaction. So people are satisfied with their wages, if they are satisfied with the benefits by their employer, and so forth. And what you see is these are, if you're really into this, the raw scores are actually R squared for those individual, the amount of variance associated with that individual item. And then collectively, in this case, collectively, this model accounts for 0.3139% of the variance of the overall model. And this is the importance part is the percentage of the overall variance explained divided up by each individual item. So if you are interested in relative importance analysis, you can look at the analytic models and it'll give you a little explanation of how those models are set up. So in this case, you can see that, for example, that I'm given a lot of freedom to decide how to do my own work. So this was the most important factor of all variance explained, followed by having opportunities to advance in my job, and wages was, you could say, the third most interesting. And you can then filter this. So let's say you're only interested in how this model performs amongst female. You can see that the importance variables change it because it's rerunning the analyses in real time. And you can then see the statistical significance of each of these items here with this configuration of the selected variables on the top. And you can do that through all these. And then I'll show you one other thing in these analytical models while I'm here, that I also included a simulator. So one of the, I'll say, issues that we're really interested in finding out more about is why someone may leave for a new employer. And you can even filter here if you're just interested in state employees. You can look at only state employees by filtering here. And if you're interested in only community members that are not state employees, you can filter it here. But I'll leave it like this for now. And here you can look at factors that are predictive of whether someone will look for a new employer in the next 12 months. What you see is that these are, by default, they're not satisfied or disagree with all of these statements, in which case they're very likely to look for a new employer. So you can see the probability of looking for a new employer here, 63%. But let's say we can say, well, they're satisfied with their wages, but all these other things are unsatisfactory. Well, it looks like there's the highest probability is that they're still going to look for a new employer. And you can see the overall highest probability here. But let's say we know one of the things that I just mentioned is a strong factor, but is freedom to decide how to do their own work. So let's change that. Now, all of a sudden, you see that they're only somewhat likely. So if they're satisfied with their job and they have some freedom to decide how to do their own work, they're still not satisfied or still disagree with all the other ones. So they're still considering it. But if you can start to turn some of these other factors, you can see what the likelihood of them actually leaving their job. In this case now, not at all likely is by far the highest probability because they're satisfied with all of these items. They still have some issues, but you can then incorporate both the statistical models I was presenting with this model simulator. And these are, I'm probably dwelling on some of the more kind of advanced features, but there's lots of possibility with this data. And honestly, we're only scratching the surface with a lot of the potential we can do with the data that we have. So I'll be building out more analytical models so that you can look and see how to better understand people that work for you in your workplace, your communities. And if there's certain things you're looking for, if you email me, I'm happy to start to build those in. So back to the actual general findings. So most of the variables are configured like this, where they're either, and these are all figures, where you see red and blue arrows. And these, anytime you see the red and blue arrows, it means that these are groups that are significantly higher or lower than the average. So you can see that the majority of people are satisfied with their life, 82%, so it's significantly higher than the average, and 18 is significantly lower. It's in this case, because they're proportional analyses, the highest proportion goes to satisfied with life. It'll make more sense in some of the tables when you see multiple columns that are red and blue. And here you can see the largest proportion of social emotional support is with family, followed by friends, and then coworkers and supervisors have providing the least available social emotional support by source. So let's say you're interested in only state workers, you could filter by that, and then you can see how these sort of things filter by state workers, for example. I break these out then by income and race and ethnicity. So here you'll see that, not surprisingly, people that are the amount of available social emotional support is lowest amongst lower income. So if you look particularly below a household that makes less than $100,000 a year, they have the least available support across all domains. And then once you get to households that have higher income, it provides a lot more opportunities to obtain support from a number of sources. This is probably one of the I don't know if it's a positive finding, but what you find is that there are no disparities amongst race or ethnicity, or relatively minimal disparities in social and emotional support across race and ethnicities for availability of social support. You can then split these up by people that are satisfied with their life or not, and not surprisingly, you can see that people that are not satisfied with their life have much lower social and emotional support available to them. In fact, oftentimes less than half of the percentage of people said that they have support. And you can see the overall finding here. So again, anytime you see the blue and arrow up, it means it's the largest proportion of the sample, meaning it's significantly higher than the overall. And then if it's red, it's significantly lower. So you can see that these are all lower and these are all higher. And if you filter it, these will change. So for example, here, have emotional support by age groups? Younger people have the hardest time getting the emotional support that they need. But let's say we're interested only in females, we can click on females, and we'll see that these numbers change, and as do the statistical tests behind them. So you can know where are the meaningful differences, at least from a statistical sense, anytime that they're blue or red. We looked at these through adverse childhood experiences. So how often people lived with someone who was depressed, mentally ill, or suicidal. Again, these sort of things were least, most people did not report this, which is good. Only 16% of the sample said that they were in these situations, with 57% of saying that they never were in these situations as a child, less than 18 years of age. But again, we're showing the overall here, and then as we go through it, you may see these variables pop up as we start to look at some disparities across other areas. Stressors, the economy, money, and housing were always the top three, followed closely by work. And I think work was another kind of stressor that was, I'll say I was surprised at how common it was amongst the top items, especially even when we look at subgroups, it's still there. Housing costs, money, and economy, kind of about this issue of very high cost of living in Hawaii that kind of pops up constantly throughout the dashboard. And you see a lot of disparities, particularly amongst, not surprisingly, people of lower income. So you can see that here, that people who live in households making less than $50,000 a year, but really households even that make less than $100,000 a year. These are all blue with the arrow up, meaning these are statistically higher than the overall proportion. So you can see that 81% of the people, not surprisingly, if you live in a household making less than 25,000, identified money as a major stressor in their lives, where it was much less common for people that make over $200,000 a year. And you can see that spread through all the stressors, that lower income had more stressors. If you look at age, younger people almost always report more stressors. The only exception to that is personal health concerns, where you see that young people had significantly lower reporting of stressors associated with personal health concerns. But as people age, particularly between the ages of 55 and 64, those stressors become more prominent. And here's actually a good example of these are both 63, but there's fewer respondents who responded when they're 65 or older. Because of that, if people are familiar with Siskel testing, that there's more power to detect a difference when there's a larger sample. So there's a larger sample between ages 55 and 64. So you see that higher because there's a smaller standard error. And so again, you see this across all of these. The only other kind of different patterns is use of technology. Younger people report use of technology as a stressor compared to people between the ages of 35 and really 64. It only pops up again when people are above the age of 65. So maybe a lot of people above the age of 65 are struggling with a lot of traditional technologies where it's possible, and frankly, I get a little nervous myself, between ages of 18 and 34, though I'm not between those ages, that AI or other kind of automation may take over some jobs or change their trajectory, and they're not sure about their future. So I'm just presuming that they may be one of the reasons why technology was a higher stressor amongst those ages. You can look at these across race and ethnicity. Unfortunately, this is also a trend you see across a lot of this dashboard, and there's a lot here. The Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders report higher stressors and fairly significantly higher stressors across all of the groups. The only one that they were not is use of technology. All the other groups were significantly higher in every single category. If you split these by sources of stress by satisfaction with life, people that were more satisfied with life were less likely, or it's red, so less likely to report all these stressors. If you are not satisfied with life, then of course you report more stressors. And if you look at gender differences, you see that females were always more likely, not always, but all the way up to personal safety and above, more likely to report these stressors compared to men and trans men. We asked a lot of questions around mental health. I'm not going to dig into these general numbers just yet, but we also have physical health similar. We looked at whether people reported being diagnosed with any of these chronic conditions. And these numbers actually were pretty close to what we see reported in other surveys that are conducted nationally, but also locally, and these numbers seem like they're fairly close to what we would expect given the population. We can split these by race and ethnicity and then across income. And unfortunately, again, we see that Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders report significantly higher more physically unhealthy days, more mentally unhealthy days, more days where they lack sleep, and more activity limitation days. So these are times when your physical or mental health are interfering with your life to the point where you can't get your daily activities done. And then if you total those up, you see large differences there. You also see those same differences with income. So people making less than $50,000 a year, you see significantly more of these kind of negative impacts. And if you make more than $150,000 a year, you see less of those. Across age, again, you see younger people are particularly susceptible to more mentally unhealthy days. That's a trend, unfortunately, that's occurred nationally. And what we've also seen locally with some of the historical data, where younger people are reporting more mental health issues than older adults. They're also struggling with sleep and even activity days, which is this combination of physical and mental health. People with less education report more or physical and mental health issues across all those categories, and those with higher education report fewer. We can split these by those ACE variables that I mentioned earlier. So if you live with someone who's depressed or mentally ill, then you have more physically unhealthy days, and then people that these things are not happening in their households. And you can see that across abuse too. I know I'm probably gonna need to speed this up to get through all this, but you can see this across financial insecurity financial security and food insecurity. So here you see that people of lower income, not surprised, that are more worried about paying their bills. So these are blue all the way across, and then it flips. Once you get to making about $100,000 to $150,000 a year, people are less worried. So these are comparing these two groups where you can start to see if you're making higher income that people are less worried about paying their financial bills, not surprisingly. But you see this also with food insecurity. And if we want to, and in fact, food insecurity is even higher amongst people with children, which is concerning. It's not a huge gap, but it's certainly significant that people with children snort more often, that they don't have, sometimes don't have enough to eat. And then if you want to look at levels of food insecurity here, you can filter this. I have it by race, but I'll go ahead and show it here. About 10% of the sample say they sometimes or often do not have enough to eat. So this is a more severe form of food insecurity. If we want to see what that rate is amongst Native Hawaiians, we can just go ahead and click it here, and we see it jumped to 16%. So we know that it's more prevalent or more common amongst people that identified as Native Hawaiian. And I'll just show one more, not surprisingly. I didn't test this one, but I'm pretty confident that people that with lower income have much higher in food insecurity. So we're at 27%, and that's just people that make less than $35,000 a year. So we can look at that. This is similar to what I was just showing you, where I have it split by race and ethnicity. So you see that 17% for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders. And then you can see other racial and ethnic categories there. And you can also see each of the individual items split here across race and ethnicity. Housing stability, we also see the same issues. So not surprisingly, people that are renting tend to be people of lower incomes, so making less than $100,000 household. And then those above that are more likely to own a home. We can see who's getting pressure to move and what people, and I'll point this out a little bit more in a moment, but people identified as considering moving out of the state in the last year. So you can see that 47% of people identified Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander reported that they were considering moving out of the state, which is something I'm particularly concerned about. You can see this a little bit more broken down here. The overall sample, about 40% said that they were interested in moving out of state or considering moving out of state. By far, the largest reason is cost of living. Again, as I mentioned, this pops up time and time again. And here, if you break it down by income, the percentage of people that were more likely to move out of state were people of lower income. So people of higher income were less likely. If we want to kind of do a deeper dive of the people that said that they're considering moving out of state, you can see that 72% of those who identify as Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders reported that was the cost of living was lower elsewhere, which is the main reason. You can see that, for example, people identified as white, they're significantly higher and that they want to be closer to family and friends. But again, that's actually only 10% of the overall sample, where actually within that subgroup, you can still see that 60% of that was because of the cost of living. Medical debt, you can see how medical debt is aligned with income and mentally and physically unhealthy days. I'm going to move a little bit quicker through some of these. But education, how satisfied people are with their education across different counties, and both are they satisfied with education for themselves and their family. Access to educational opportunities by income, education, and race and ethnicity. We have now just a set of items that are around community and neighborhood issues. So you see that 68% of the people said that people around here are willing to help their neighbors. This is a strength, and that they feel safe walking around their neighborhood day or night. So these are, I'll say, considering positive findings amongst communities. If you want to know more about your county, you can select it here. If you want to know about subgroups, so I mean, an easy way is a lot of, if people live in lower income neighborhoods, they are more likely to be lower income themselves. So you could say, are these factors as common in people that are making less money? And not surprisingly, you can see that these numbers drop when you filter for lower income, that people are less willing to help their neighbors. There's more issues around violence, more issues about across the board, everything kind of deteriorates. Community cohesion and income. So this is more or less what I was just showing you, that you can see that lower income struggles across all of these different groups. And there's actually some interesting literature on this, is that people in this neighborhood do not share the same values. You can see that it's a little bit of a different pattern, but overall the numbers are not that different in these lower income groups here. It's until you get to this 100,000, you start to see them kind of drop there, that they are able to, you end up with a more homogeneous community when you get to the higher incomes. Cohesion and race. So my neighborhood is safe from crime. You see that it is least endorsed among Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, and it's more endorsed by pretty much every other group. Violence is a problem, more likely to be identified amongst Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, and that people are less willing to help each other. If you see there's fewer, at least through some of these, on feeling confident walking around their neighborhood. And you see less of a differences here amongst people generally not getting along. If you want to look at the greatest issues facing people's neighborhood, you can see that homelessness is a common concern. You see that across the board. This is a word cloud that then can reconfigure based on your filters here. And these are thematic organizations of the different items that people responded to on this. So if you, let's say, you're interested in knowing, are the concerns different on Kauai compared to other states? So you can see how these may reconfigure themselves based on the responses by county. Again, you can do these by the other items also. We also have a potential solution, so you can kind of match these. So you can see there's a question around, what do you feel are the potential solutions to the issue that you identified in your neighborhood? So if you want to match what people identified, you can say infrastructure and transportation issues. You can see that the word cloud will reconfigure around what aligns with that. And you can also then see the items. For disaster preparedness, we can see that these are rates or prevalence rates that people said that they experienced each one of these disasters. in the last year. So you can see that 53% of the sample said that they didn't experience any disasters in the last year. Flooding, wildfires were the most commonly reported. And then people reported these are of people that reported these disasters, how prepared do they feel? So 23% of the people that had experienced a disaster said they were very well prepared. 20% said they were not prepared, and 57% said that they were somewhat or moderately prepared. If you look at people that did not experience a disaster, you can see that people that had not were even less likely to say that they're well or very well prepared. And you have a lot of people somewhat or moderately prepared. You could probably say that it's because it hasn't been tested. They haven't experienced a disaster, and they'll probably refine their responses once they get there. Kind of an interesting or problematic finding, depending on how you interpret, is that people who are not prepared, overall, 17% of the people that said that they were not prepared. It varies by county. It's a little bit higher in Honolulu County for saying that they're level prepared, that they were not prepared. And you see that it's level of preparation for the last disaster. You can see that 38% said they weren't prepared if they're in Maui County. So that suggests probably that there was a large portion of the people that experienced the wildfires that also said that they were not prepared. You can actually also look at that here by going by disaster last year. You can click on wildfire, and now you can see results of only people that said that they experienced the wildfire. So you can see that here. There is about 1,200 people that said they experienced a wildfire. We also know that there was wildfires on Oahu, and I think probably other neighbor islands last year. So let's say we only want to look at Maui County. We can just go ahead and click it here. We can see that, of people that experienced wildfires and living on Maui, you can see that 44% of people said they were not prepared, and only 11% said that they were very well prepared. Just by filtering, you can get a lot more information there. And overall, you can see that there's 474 people that completed the survey that said that they're living on Maui and experienced the wildfire. Here you can see the association of the mental and physical unhealthy days across experiencing different disasters. So you can see that people that said they experienced the wildfire had significantly higher number of mentally unhealthy days than other groups. And you can see that they had significantly higher lack of sleep days. Also, people that had higher winds also had lower days, as well as those that had experienced, this is likely the chemical spill associated with Red Hill and other contaminants and hurricane. Here we can see where people are getting their information from across different ages. I'll kind of flip through these quickly because there's a lot of information here if you want to dive into it. And these are issues around how people might be better prepared. So for example, again, you can filter by disasters that people experienced to then see what are the things that could be corrected in future preparation. Differences by ages. Okay, so this is the last kind of quick section I wanted to cover that is associated with worker well-being. So this was a large initiative, something that we really wanted to measure and measure well, that there is a lot of really interesting and policy-related findings for. So these are different benefits that we asked people how important each one were. So people identified them as being very important. These are these kind of like lighter green colors. And you can see that if they're blue and arrows up, you know that they're proportionally higher or they're proportionally reported simply more likely. So very important all the way across. It's really actually down till you get to these telework, education, and these that were less endorsed. Now, I will point out that even though flexible work schedule and these teleworks were less endorsed here, there's some interesting caveats to this, which I'll mention in just a moment about who says that, and are these people looking for another job, which is a different predictor. So one of the things I wanted to point out is that things like paid family leave is significantly proportionally people wanted or found that to be very important. But it's one of the traditional benefits that are lacking, particularly among state workers. So it's one of those places that a lot of these traditional benefits people have already. But as we click down, what are the important benefits that people want but they don't have? And that's one of those. We can split this by income. Oh, and I was still had Count Maui on there. Shoot. I'll show it to you again, but it's a similar trend. Um, so here you can see the things of lower income. People of the living in lower income households have different needs, benefits that they're looking for than people of upper income. So you can see again, if there's certain employees that you really need in the certain types of jobs and vacancies that you have, you can really look at, okay, what are the types of benefits that they're looking for? Or in the next slide, what are the age groups? So I'm really trying to attract people of younger ages. We have an aging cohort of people in our system. Really need to bring in new people. So what are the benefits they're looking for? Again, so you can see here that things like flexible work schedule, taking unpaid leave, telework, all these things are more endorsed by people of the younger ages, and you see them fade off. Not surprisingly, they're less interested in retirement and more interested in retirement as they get closer to, of course, retirement age. You can see these splits by race and ethnicity. Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders report needing more of these benefits or looking for more of these benefits than some of the other groups. This is a factor around people saying that they make a genuine effort to leave their job in the next 12 months, look for a new employer. There's a lot of ways you can dig into this data that's really interesting. I'll point out that when these are once one of these columns is blue and the other one's red, it means we have a separation. So people are less likely to leave their job when they endorse health insurance, paid vacation, retirement contribution. That's not surprising. You wouldn't look for a new employer if the factor that you're most interested in is in retirement contributions, because that's how you get retirement. But if the likelihood that you leave a new job, flexible work schedule, telework, educational benefits, employee assistance, these are all things that people are oftentimes not available. And these are drivers or what separates people who are going to look for a new job and those that may not. We can go into workplace culture, and those are some of those analytical models I showed you where we're using some predictive models to look at why people may or may not leave their job, experiences they have at the job, how likely they leave the job with a little more granular detail, the environment that they're working in, so the physical conditions, pleasantness of the work environment, special accommodations that they may need, and how safe it is. Conflict, so safety at work, so how often people are exposed to physical violence at the job. So 8% of people said that they're exposed to physical environments, 5% said they're sexually harassed, and then 16% said they're bullied, threatened, and 27% said supervisor or coworkers were putting them down and addressed in unprofessional terms. So you can break these down, and unfortunately, I'll just show you this, that also if they did report any of these, if they reported that violence harassment. And unfortunately, the majority of people did not report that. And you can see why they did not report that here. These are challenges at work, similar word clouds, same process, workload and time management is the biggest issue. And again, proposed solutions. And this works in a similar manner than the other ones. And that is it. So I'll stop here and let people give an opportunity for a question and answer for the final 10 minutes.
Jack, there are a number of questions in the chat and in the Q&A. Maybe you want to address some of those. I think for the most part, Lori has done an amazing job of answering the questions in the Q&A. But one of the questions was, is there a way to download real raw data from the survey for research? Obviously, that's not available at the dashboard at this time, but what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so that is my hope. So my so that I'll frame it this way. We wanted to get this dashboard out and have it as filterable and transparent as possible so that anyone can go in and find the majority of things they're looking for. I totally understand that people would want the raw data. I'm one of those people. I would like to be able to curate the data and secure the privacy of people that responded as much as possible. So it is something we're working towards. I can't promise we'll have it in a certain timeline. But it's something I'd like to be able to just have the whole data set available, posted so that people could download it. We just may have to mask some items to make sure that it's it completely de-identified until we can get to that point. The other kind of comment is if there is certain things you're looking at or certain combinations of variables that you're looking at, you can email me directly, say that too out loud. But you can also go to the contact page on the website. We can create those tables and build them into the dashboard. Like we have those analytical models, you can kind of pop out. You have to double click on that, and all those other pages come out. I'm happy to build in more of those to answer your question. Then we can just make it publicly available. So those same analyses, we can make that available to everyone. If there's just certain combinations. So, for example, we've had inquiries by legislators and certain things that people really want to know about their districts and areas. We can filter the data and then export it. Or if there's certain variables, if you go to our website, you can see there are links to the actual surveys, meaning that you can read item by item the questions that are asked. If there's certain variables you want filtered for, we can probably do that as a special request if you send it to us. For example, if you're interested in veterans, we could actually export a whole report that is only a report on veterans. We have that capability. It's just not a built-in filter right now. But if it is something, I'll say by popular request that people are looking for, I'm happy to integrate that. That's not a problem.
Oh, looks like there's another question in the Q&A. In the future, will you be able to choose something from one of the pages, like social stress, and choose one of the options like money? Will you be able to see how that group responded among the rest of the data set? Maybe your answer just now kind of answers that as well, but any other thoughts you have about that?
Yeah. So it's gonna be hard to have, I'll say, filters for everything, which is one of them. There is a mechanism to be able to build, I'll say, build your own reports and tables within the environment that we built the dashboard. That's another route we could go, except other than just creating the raw data, where you can, I'll say, basically construct your own tables. I think that is something that we could also do and explore. We're just not there yet, but um, yeah. So for something like selecting for social support, we'd have to create that as a filterable variable that you could then have extend through the whole report. So that'd be great if we could. I'm happy to move towards that. Just email me. I'll see what we can do.
Any other questions from folks? Oh, I realize my video is off. Um, I do think, Danielle has been doing an amazing job of dropping a bunch of resources into the chat. Things like the OWR website, the HPI website, as well as our contact form and copies to the survey, which UH has made available publicly as well. There are no other questions then. Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about next steps and your hopes for all of this? Oh, wait, maybe there's one more. What did you find was the most efficient and responsive way to get the word out and get people to respond back to you?
That's a great question. Um, So say, I mean, you saw that there was a large sample from the state employees. That was a very successful campaign. And that was mostly because we had access to the governor's office who was able to disseminate it through all of the state agencies. There were places where we had lack of representation or probably not appropriate, not enough. And that was people that don't sit behind a desk all day. So people that are literally doing road construction. Even teachers where they're teaching all day, they're not, sitting in front of a computer where they can fill out a survey. So there's those. And then we also miss people that are incarcerated and things like that. Um, as far as just getting the word out, sending it to large community organizations, I'd like to have a more structured way to get it through neighborhood organizations. So if we could have neighborhood organizations disseminate it to their own lists and get encourage their own responses, that would be really helpful. I mean, just like anything, word of mouth and just trying to post it. We tried to go through lots of different media to try to get the word out. And I think we did okay. But I think we could do better. And so we'll keep on trying.
Thanks, Jack. Do you want to talk about next steps and your
Next
thoughts?
steps. So there's, I have lots of things. So one is we could do so much more with the data. I mean, there's all kinds of advanced types of modeling that we can do with the data we already incorporated. We can incorporate census data and other things to build larger and more informative analytical models. We're also looking to do this survey every 2 years. So we're targeting the spring of 2026, in which case then we'll have additional time point, but then connect people over time as much as possible so that we can see trends across all these different variables. Right now, we're just pulling out historical data to look at any trends or changes over time. We're going to pursue doing, there's interventions that they're looking to do within the workplace, so particularly with state agencies to develop and address trauma-informed care needs. I'd like to be able to see what I'll call like more listening tours where we have people who are going out to communities, presenting the data to the communities, and then getting more information on why these issues are coming up. Because right now we'll say we don't have the thick data. We have the thin data. We have data points, but we don't have the rich explanations of the narratives and the stories around why people trust their neighbors or why they don't trust their neighbors. And that's where some of this programmatic and community building can take place.
Thanks so much. On behalf of the Office of Wellness and Resilience, and I know on behalf of Dr. Burrell, we're really grateful for everyone's presence here today, really grateful for the ways you participate in the survey, and would love to collaborate in the future. So please fill out the contact form. Please give UH feedback on survey topics, the dashboard itself. Certainly it's an evolving tool that we hope will be used for good to protect our community for all the years to come. So thanks for being here. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.